She knew something most people didn't. Long before the world stood still in grief, long before millions watched two young princes walk behind their mother's coffin, Princess Diana had already made a decision that would quietly reshape the future of the royal family. It wasn't announced, it wasn't celebrated, and it certainly wasn't understood. But hidden inside a legal document written years before her death, Diana made a move that ensured her voice would never truly be silenced. And when the truth finally surfaced, it revealed something far more powerful than money. It revealed protection, strategy, and perhaps rebellion. Because Diana wasn't just leaving behind a legacy, she was choosing who would carry it forward. And that choice changed everything. To understand why Diana's final decisions mattered so much, you have to begin long before she ever became a princess. Diana Frances Spencer was born into privilege, but not into peace. From the outside, her life appeared destined for greatness. Her family was deeply connected to British aristocracy, moving in the same social circles as royalty itself. Grand estates, noble titles, and generations of tradition surrounded her from the very beginning. But inside the walls of her childhood home, things were far more fragile. Her parents' marriage was strained by expectation, disappointment, and emotional distance. The pressure to produce a male heir weighed heavily on the family, and that quiet tension lingered in the air long after Diana was born. When her parents divorced, the emotional fracture left behind would shape her deeply. She was still a child, watching her world split apart, learning early that stability could disappear without warning. She grew up shy, sensitive, and observant. She wasn't the loudest in the room. She didn't command attention, but she felt everything: pain, kindness, rejection, compassion. And those feelings would eventually become her greatest strength. She didn't excel academically, but she excelled at something far more human. She cared. She listened. She noticed people others ignored. She worked ordinary jobs. She cleaned. She cooked. She cared for children. She lived in a modest apartment with friends. She navigated life without the shield of a crown. She understood the real world, and that understanding would later make her completely different from every royal who came before her. Because Diana didn't see herself as untouchable. She saw herself as human, and that humanity would eventually make her unforgettable. Then came the moment that changed everything. She met Prince Charles. At first, she was just a young woman on the edge of royal circles, quiet, unassuming, almost invisible. But over time, Charles began to notice her. She was beautiful, yes, but more importantly, she was unguarded. She represented something the monarchy desperately needed: innocence, hope, and renewal. Their courtship moved quickly, faster than either of them truly understood. And soon, the world watched as Diana Spencer became Princess Diana. Their wedding was called a fairy tale. Millions watched in awe. The dress, the ceremony, the promise of a perfect future. But behind the spectacle, cracks were already forming. Charles carried emotional ties to another woman, Camilla, a relationship that had never truly ended. And Diana felt it. At first, she tried to ignore it. She tried to believe love could grow over time. She tried to fulfill the role expected of her. But loneliness has a way of revealing truth. She wasn't just competing for affection. She was competing with history, with expectations, with a system that didn't bend for emotions. And slowly, the fairy tale began to dissolve. Yet, even in pain, Diana discovered her purpose. She turned outward. She connected with people others avoided. She shook hands with AIDS patients when fear kept others away. She comforted the sick, the poor, the forgotten. She didn't just represent royalty. She represented compassion, and the world loved her for it. They called her the people's princess, not because of her title, but because of her heart. Her marriage, however, continued to deteriorate. Behind palace walls, the emotional distance grew unbearable. Public smiles hid private suffering. The pressure, the betrayal, the isolation, it all became too much. Eventually, the separation became official. Then the divorce. For Diana, it was both an ending and a beginning. She lost the formal role of royal wife, but she gained something far more important: freedom. For the first time in years, she controlled her own future. She made her own decisions. She rebuilt her identity. She discovered her own strength. And quietly, without fanfare, she made another critical decision. She wrote her will. At the time, it seemed like a routine legal step, a practical matter, something responsible people did. But Diana wasn't thinking only about the present. She was thinking about the future. She was thinking about her sons, Prince William, Prince Harry. They weren't just her children. They were her greatest priority. And she knew the world they would inherit would not be easy. So she planned, carefully, deliberately, and privately. When Diana died in 1997, the world was thrown into shock. It felt impossible. Someone so vibrant, so alive, so beloved gone in an instant. Crowds gathered. Flowers covered palace gates. Tears fell across continents. But behind the mourning, another process quietly began. Her estate was opened, and inside it lay the truth of her final wishes. Her wealth, built from inheritance, divorce settlement, and personal assets, was substantial. Millions in investments, jewelry, possessions filled with personal meaning. Naturally, her sons were the primary beneficiaries, but there was something unique about how Diana structured it. She didn't simply hand them money. She gave them independence. The majority of her estate was placed into trust, protected, preserved, not for immediate access, but for the right moment. She understood something many people didn't. Sudden wealth could overwhelm young lives, so she ensured her sons would receive their inheritance gradually, with maturity, with perspective. She was protecting them, even in her absence, but there was more. Her jewelry, perhaps the most symbolic part of her legacy, was divided with care. She wanted their future wives to one day wear those pieces. She wasn't just preserving wealth. She was preserving connection. And years later, that wish came true. Her sapphire engagement ring would appear again. Her bracelets, her diamonds, her presence, woven into the next generation, still visible, still meaningful, still hers. But perhaps the most powerful part of her decision wasn't the money itself. It was what the money made possible. It gave her sons options, freedom, the ability to choose their own paths. For Prince William, it provided stability as he prepared for future kingship. For Prince Harry, it provided something else entirely: a way out. Years later, when Harry stepped away from royal duties, he revealed something deeply personal. His mother's inheritance had made it possible. It had given him the means to build a life outside the institution that had once defined everything. In that moment, Diana's final act became clear. She hadn't just left money. She had left protection. She had anticipated that her sons might one day need space, independence, safety, and she made sure they would have it, even if she wasn't there to guide them. Diana had always lived differently. She broke traditions. She spoke openly. She connected emotionally. And even in death, she refused to let the system fully control her legacy. Her decisions empowered her sons to shape their own futures, not just as princes, but as men. Men with choices, men with freedom, men with the ability to define themselves beyond the crown. And that may have been her greatest gift of all, because Diana understood something deeply human. Titles fade, power shifts, institutions evolve. But love, when protected, endures. Today, her influence remains everywhere, in the way her sons speak, in the causes they champion, in the compassion they show. Her legacy isn't confined to vaults or trusts. It lives in actions, in courage, in independence. She wasn't just preparing them to inherit wealth. She was preparing them to inherit strength. And perhaps that was her true intention all along. Not rebellion, not revenge, but protection. A mother's quiet promise that no matter what happened, they would never be powerless. Princess Diana entered the royal family as a shy young woman searching for belonging. She left it as something far greater, a symbol, a force, a legacy that could not be contained, and in the end, her final decision ensured that her story would never truly end. Because she didn't just leave behind memories, she left behind freedom. And freedom was something no crown could ever take away.